Welcome back, everybody. It's Wednesday. Just got home from work and we're gonna start tearing apart the driver's side front suspension, get it looking like the passenger side, and then we're gonna go ahead and fire up the plasma cutter and cut as much of the upper spring perch off as we can. I test fitted the airbags that I received today, and this whole mess just is not gonna work for it, so it's gonna be a completely custom fab job. As expected, the driver's side came off a lot easier, but that's only because I had it apart probably about a year ago. So next step is to fire up the plasma cutter and get to cutting. Here we go. Moving on to phase two, I'm stripping off any of the little plating that's left on here. You can see I already got this side, and I'm gonna grind off all these welds and clean this up real nice so I can just run a plate and then design a bracket that comes out to support the airbag. Made some pretty good progress so far. This is the passenger side, which is still just pretty nasty plasma cut, and as you can see, still some welds to grind down, just to give you an idea of what it looked like. And this is what I've gotten the driver's side down to. Nice clean edge, pretty flat. Plate should lay over that real nice. And this is a bump stop. Where we're going, we don't need bump stops. No more bump stops. About to call it a wrap on Wednesday. Got the spring perches completely lopped off, cleaned up, ready to make cardboard templates and then cut it out of plate. I just threw a bag on the lower control arm to get an idea of what we're gonna be looking at. Check it out. So I'm pretty sure this is pretty close to what it would be like laid out. So probably the top perch will come off somewhere in this area, I imagine. But we'll figure all that out tomorrow. Here it is on Thursday. I bet you thought the first thing I was going to do was make a cardboard template to make those plates, but actually I mocked up the front suspension with the airbag to try and get an idea of how I'm going to get away with mounting a shock in there. And I think this is going to work. The bag is a lot shorter than the spring. The overall operating height is like 9 inches, which is only a half an inch taller than it is right now. And if I can make some little brackets that come along the control arm here and kind of land up in this area to mount the shock to, I can get enough angle to prevent the upper control arm from ever hitting it, and I can run a bracket off of the top of the frame here over to the top of the shock. So that's the plan so far. We'll see how true we stick to it, but I think now I'm going to start making those cardboard templates. Template's done. Check out how good this fit is. Let's see if it fits the passenger side just as good. So it fits the passenger side pretty well too. I actually just have to cut a little bit more off right here, but just a little grinder action. Plates are done. Let's do a little test fit, see what we got. All right, as expected, pretty good fit. So I'm just gonna bust out the sanding disc now, clean up the frame rails a little bit, and then get this thing welded on there. Got it all tacked in there. Let's lay down some bead. Here we go. I decided to go ahead and make the template for the upper bag mount. It's just going to be one single piece of 3/8 plate, or 3/16 plate I should say, and I'm just going to throw a couple 90s in it, and that's exactly how the bag will mount. And then I'm going to have to notch out some of the lower control arm here and plate over that spring perch. Starting Friday morning off by cutting out the upper bag mounts in steel. So transferred the templates already. I'm going to use the plasma to cut them out. Let's get started. Again, super crooked cuts, except where I used a ruler as a guide, but you know, I'll throw them on a grinder and the belt sander and they'll come out looking all right. Got them all cleaned up and they still fit the template pretty dang good. So the next step is to mark where the bends in the paper are on the metal, and then draw lines so that I could throw it in the press brake. Okay, it's time to turn this into that. So this is what we're working with to throw the 90-degree bends in our upper bag mounts. So this is what we started with, paper template. Transferred that template to 3/16 plate. Drew on where the bends had to go. And then we threw this into the finger brake. And we end up with this. Not too bad. I'm pretty happy. And it fits pretty dang good, I think. So we're gonna roll with that on the second one. So as I'm pumping the bottle jack down, I use a tape measure to take a measurement from a reference point off of the frame to the bottle jack to determine how much I'm bending it. And I get a baseline on the first one, which in this case is 2 inches, 2 7/8 inches. And I just shoot for that on all 4 bends, and it gives me pretty much the same angle. So it's not an exact science, off by, you know, a hair on each side, but it's close enough for me. So let's start mocking up where the bag is going to mount to it and get the holes drilled. Yep, you guessed it. First step, paper template. Now we're just going to transfer where these holes, center lines are to this, and then we'll be able to transfer it to those. A little technique I like to use to transfer the holes is kind of just while I have the template set down over them, apply some pressure, and if you're lucky, most times you will get a little mark showing exactly where they are. So now all we have to do is you know, circle that with a pencil and then punch the center out and transfer it to metal. All right, so the way I determine where the paper template is going to sit on the upper perch is I just set it on top of the bag and then set the air spring perch, sorry, on top of that. And I'm gonna grab my pencil and just trace out the line right here. And then when I flip the perch over, the holes will be exactly where I need them to be. And I'll just hit the centers with a punch and we'll start drilling. And now we have our drill marks. So let's fire up the drill. Moment of truth. Do you think it fit? How about perfectly? Not too bad for some cardboard templates. So we'll get the other one done and then we'll get these welded up to the frame. And we're moving right along. Got the driver's side tacked in. It looks pretty good. Still have to figure out for the lower control arm if I'm gonna have to notch a section out and sink the bag in, or actually build kind of a pedestal to make the bag sit up higher. And I'm gonna determine that by throwing the wheels back on it and figuring out where my ride height is gonna be. So I've thrown the wheel on and I've got it set at approximate ride height. And the way I'm determining that is by the tie rod angle. I think it should be like angled down just slightly. And it looks like what we're gonna do is, I think I'm probably gonna leave the bag sitting approximately where it is. Usable ride height for it is anywhere from 6 to 9 inches. And I'd like to have the ability to basically raise it up to go over things like speed bumps and pebbles, you know, things like that. So next step is going to be to bust that lower control arm off and start hacking it up. I dropped the front end onto the ground to get an idea of how low it will go, and it will go so low that the bumper can remove asphalt. It's actually probably going to lift back up off of the ground a little bit because the back end can still go down about 6 inches before it sits on the axle. And I'm not going to C-notch the rear. It doesn't really need to, you know, lay on the ground for my purposes. But as you can see, even with it fully slammed, we still have a good, I would say, 3 inches of bag usage. So we should be all set to start modifying that lower control. So I took the lower control arms off the frame and cut the spring perch portion of it out with the plasma cutter. And what we're gonna go ahead and do now is just create a cardboard template that's gonna make a perch right here for the airbag. Here's our template for the piece of plate we're gonna make to make a new lower air spring perch. It might require a little bending. We'll find out shortly. Let's get it cut out of metal. So I've cleaned up the control arms after plasma cutting them, and I've prepped them for the plates that we've cut out. And this is what we're looking like. Got the plates all cleaned up, ready to go. Just gonna weld them in and then mock them back up on the car and figure out where we need to drill holes for the bag mounts. And then we should be reassembling the front suspension. So the control arms are all finished being welded up, and they're ready to be mounted back on the truck. The basic idea behind what I did here was the surface wasn't real flat, so I kind of just blended out the peaks with the valleys and still managed to keep the overall plate area flat enough for the bag to mount to and not sit all cattywampus. So let's go throw them back on and figure out where we need to drill some holes. Everything's mounted up, and this is what we're working with right here. So my next step is going to be to take the Sharpie here and trace around where the plate sits, and then I'm going to make a mark from the bag down to the plate like that, and that'll basically tell me exactly where the bag needs to sit on the control arm, and I can take it up to my workbench and basically figure out where the two mounting holes need to go from there. Alright, I traced out where the bag sits with the Sharpie. I made my 3 marks that are going to basically establish where the bag needs to sit. So let's throw everything back up on the workbench. Okay, so remember this template? Basically, I just lined up the 2 bolt holes, and then I made the clocking marks onto the paper there. And I'm gonna set that down here. We just throw these on here. It's actually gonna go like that, so I'll have to transfer the marks to this side, but then that'll give us exactly where we need to drill our holes. So, just need to switch my marks. And then, boom. This is where we need to drill, here and here. Let me grab a Sharpie. One, two. I've got the bag mounted to the lower control arm with 1 bolt, and unfortunately it's way too long, but it holds it in place where it needs to be until I make a trip to the hardware store, probably later on tonight or maybe tomorrow morning. We'll see. Gonna mount it back up now and then attach a top bolt, see what we're working with. And there you have it. The fit is great, and I don't think it looks too bad myself. So now I'm just gonna do the driver's side and then head to the hardware store, I guess, if I have enough time. Well, everything bolts together awesome, and it's about that time to throw the suspension back on and the wheels and see how low this thing really will go. And this is where we're at. So let's get to it. Well, once I threw the front sheet metal on, I couldn't help but grab the hood and lower the cab down. And she is looking good. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. And things are moving right along. So the plan now is to pull all the sheet metal back off again and finish welding the upper bag mount and start designing the shock mount. And then I think we'll be pretty close to being done with the frame. We're gonna have to design a structure to support the sheet metal as well, but that's gonna come after we do the floor and the cab, because I'm not gonna mount to anything that's there presently. So I gotta remake all that first. All right, it's Saturday morning. We're back at it on the COE. And first step today is getting the upper spring perches fully welded in, since we like where the ride height is gonna be. Already got started on that. So once we finish that, the plan was to kind of mock up some shock mounts, but I'm gonna need to order the correct shock first so that I have the correct mounting points. And I think I'm gonna go with Q1A, but I gotta figure out exactly what length I want them. I'm thinking it'll probably be similar to the stock length shock because my ride height is gonna be the same. But once we get everything welded up and put back together, we'll take some measurements and figure that out. So one thing I was noticing when I had the chassis aired out was that the airbag would fold up and rest on the edges of this. And that's not a big deal as long as the edges aren't sharp, which they were. They were like a sharp 90. So I went ahead and took a sanding disc on the angle grinder and just rounded all the edges off so that it's a smooth surface when the bag sits on it. It's not really a big deal because as long as the car's not moving when the bag is completely deflated, causing, you know, vibrational rubbing issues, it shouldn't cause any damage, especially with these rounded off edges. So that's why I was grinding.